Yes, master.
All right. I guess it's finally time to get this done. I've tried to record this review 3 times, and each time I spent an hour giving you my thoughts on this movie, so now I've become exceedingly good at this. And each time the file was corrupted, so hopefully I've figured the problem out. Now, I've done a few tests, and I think this time we're going to be okay. So finally, I get to give my review for Episode 9, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. So, what did I think about it? I'm going to give you my thoughts on the film overall. We'll kind of dive into all the different parts. And I'm just going to share everything that I think about the movie. So this is going to be spoiler-filled. So this is your spoiler warning for the review. If you haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker yet, definitely go check that out first and then come back and share your thoughts. I mean, if you agree with me, disagree with me, did you like the film? Did you dislike the film? Just, comment below and, I'll respond in the chat. So, off the bat, overall, I liked it. I think that, there were definitely a few decisions that were made that I wouldn't have made, and there were definitely a few things that I would have liked to have seen in the movie that I didn't see in the movie. So, we'll get into all that. Now, first of all, I think that J.J. Abrams did probably the best that he could have done given the circumstances and given what he had left to work with after The Last Jedi. So this movie retcons a lot of things from The Last Jedi. So if you were a huge fan of some of those decisions that were made, then you may not love this movie. But if you loved The Force Awakens and you kind of felt like there was a hiccup in The Last Jedi, then this might be up your alley. Either way, there's a ton of fan service, which I think is actually a good thing. I know people look at that as a negative thing. I don't. And there are a ton of callbacks, a lot of Easter eggs. And overall, I think it was just done well. It was very tasteful. I think there was some, risks taken, as far as like advancing the mythos behind the Force and the Jedi and the Sith. And this movie is filled with lore and things like that. So if you like that kind of thing, which I'm a big nerd for, so I love that kind of thing. And it's a very fast-paced movie from start to finish. Watching it, I've seen it now 4 times, and each time I wonder, wow, how did we get to the end here so fast? I actually ended up, seeing it 3 times with my, first by myself, and then a couple times with my friends, and then I took my son to go check it out over the holiday here. So I still love the movie. The first time I was definitely, really surprised about, a lot of the things that happened. Now, just kind of starting off with where the movie starts off with the crawl and diving right into the return of Palpatine, I would like to have seen there be more of a gradual progression into Palpatine coming back. More like we hear whispers, and then after maybe, a few minutes into the movie, then we finally get the reveal that he is really there. But they elect to dive right into it, and they have a lot of ground to cover in this movie, so I'm assuming that they just want to get to that reveal so that he kind of looms over the whole entire film. There was a transmission that was released only on Fortnite. I believe it was a week or 2 before the movie dropped. That basically was a transmission from the Emperor saying that the Sith were returning, basically. And then in the beginning of the film, Kylo Ren has to find the Sith wayfinder on Mustafar. So that beginning part of the film, that beginning scene, is actually on Mustafar. I wish they had actually explained that or shown the name of the planet that they were on in the beginning of the movie, because I didn't realize that until I read the visual dictionary. So I did actually end up picking up the visual dictionary to The Rise of Skywalker, and this is awesome. It's worth its weight in gold, my friends. This thing actually explains a lot of things that I kind of, after leaving the film, felt like there were maybe some holes or, some things that I would have liked to have known a little bit more about. And there are still, even after reading that, some holes. I mean, for sure, but some leaps in logic, basically. But it does flesh out a lot of things that are pretty interesting. So it's awesome. So basically, he finds the Sith Wayfinder on Mustafar, and the reason Mustafar is starting to, grow vegetation again. I mean, you could see when he's flying to the planet in the beginning that it's got lava on it, but the reason it's starting to not look quite as much like the Mustafar that you saw or recognized from the Revenge of the Sith is because there is actually a game that's canon that's called Vader Immortal. It's a virtual reality game on the Oculus that basically explains that, and it shows like what happens to Vader's castle, and you can actually see some dark architecture in the back. Behind the smoke, and that's supposed to be the remnants of Vader's castle. Now, I'm not going into details as to what happened there, but there is actually a storyline for that game. So if you want to know, what that's about, go check out the Vader Immortal series, and you'll find out more about the history behind what's going on with Vader's castle there. But I do feel like it was a missed opportunity to not show Kylo, kind of rummaging through the remnants of Vader's castle. I mean, we're there, and it's kind of cool that he's going back to Mustafar, a planet that we're very aware of, and obviously there's some history there. It would have been nice to, I guess, really kind of, at least let us know that we're on Mustafar, at the very least, and maybe even show, some more wreckage of Vader's castle, or some more basically digging into the remnants of the castle would have been cool. Nonetheless, he gets the Sith Wayfinder. He goes right to Exegol. And Exegol is this Sith planet that is surrounded by all these ridiculously hellish circumstances and this crazy atmosphere. So there's solar storms and the atmosphere is just really weird to get into, so you have to have this Sith Wayfinder to get there to know the coordinates. And he gets there, and right off the bat, they break the news to you that Palpatine has kind of been pulling the strings behind the scene the whole time. So he's survived. He's survived since the Return of the Jedi. And he's been basically building up a Sith fleet this entire time. And he was, both Snoke, or at least, kind of the puppeteer behind Snoke. And then he also was the voice that Kylo was hearing as Vader, basically in his head. So when Kylo was trying to talk to Vader's helmet and he thought he was talking to his grandfather, he was actually, getting that from Palpatine. And then you actually see Kylo walk by a bunch of tanks where they are actually cloning Snoke. So you can see there's two Supreme Leader Snokes just being cloned in this tank there. So he actually fully manufactured Snoke. So I don't know, in the visual dictionary it marks Exegol as Snoke's home world. So I don't know if there was, an actual Snoke before, and then Palpatine just basically, started, kind of controlling him and then cloned him, or if, Snoke is just entirely a fabrication of Palpatine's imagination. I don't know how he controlled Palpatine. Was he actually physically like essence transferring into Snoke to control him while he was training Kylo? I don't know. But basically the visual dictionary explains that the whole purpose of Snoke was to kind of be a test for Kylo. So in Sith history, the typical way a Sith master and apprentice work is that, the Sith chooses an apprentice, the Sith Lord chooses an apprentice, and then eventually it's that apprentice's job to overthrow his master and then become the Sith master himself and then pick his own apprentice, and the cycle goes on like that. And that's one of your goals as a Sith, is to eventually overthrow your master and become the master yourself. That's just how it works. The Sith apprentice always kills the master. And Snoke was chosen to be Kylo's master so that he would be tested to see if he would ever overthrow his master. And he actually did succeed in that in The Last Jedi. So the way they tied that up together, I thought was actually pretty cool. And that's the reason that Supreme Leader Snoke never takes the title of Emperor. He calls himself Supreme Leader because he is still, in fact, working for the Emperor. So there's still an Emperor. And then eventually, Kylo takes the mantle of Supreme Leader of the First Order. Now, the reason they chose the planet of Exegol rather than the whole Sith homeworld of Korriban or Moraban is because Exegol is surrounded by this ridiculous atmosphere. So to get to Exegol is a lot more difficult, and they felt like, because Korriban or Moraban is the known home of the Sith, that they would have been easily spotted there or figured out. So they, in order to hide the plan and the Sith fleet, they chose the world of Exegol to keep it kind of masked from the rest of the galaxy. So, again, they do a lot of explaining in the book about, kind of their thought process behind choosing Exegol in the first place and, what is going on there. Now, all these Sith troopers that are there, the entire fleet was manufactured apparently in Exegol. So I don't know how they got the resources there for that. We still don't know exactly how Palpatine survived the Death Star. And that's something that I would have liked to have seen, explained in a little bit more detail. I understand that there's a lot of plot to cover, but that's kind of a big deal, right? I mean, Palpatine living after being thrown down a shaft in the Death Star, and then the Death Star explodes. So, I mean, is that the same Palpatine body that we're getting here in Exegol? He mentions that he has died before, so what I'm assuming that happened is that he actually did die on the Death Star and somehow transferred his essence into either a clone of himself or something else, something along those lines, though. So I don't know how this actually happened. I would have liked to have at least gotten like a hint. I mean, they didn't have to fully flesh it out, but they could have kind of given us like some sort of a hint as to how he, let us know that it has the ability to essence transfer. Now, they kind of did that later on in the film by, explaining how he would, kind of transfer his essence into Rey. So, I mean, I guess obviously that's the case, but this was such a big deal in the prequels and how it was such a difficult thing to do to figure out a way to, save people's lives or stay alive, basically, is one of the things that he used to seduce Anakin to the dark side. So that power itself is kind of thrown around in this movie a lot. So I can understand why people may have a problem with that because, again, the ability to bring people back from the dead or to save somebody's life or heal them is, very evident in this film, for sure. Now, Palpatine, again, basically shows him the whole Sith fleet and tells him that he can give him the Sith fleet as long as he kills Rey. And then he tells him that he knows more about Rey than Kylo does. And Kylo's like, what do you mean? And he has this like really sinister grin. So obviously we find out, a little bit more about Rey's parentage and her lineage, and, whether you like that or dislike that, that's going to be up to you. But I personally thought it was okay. So, you find out that Rey has been training on this resistance base with Leia, and you find out that Poe and Finn and Chewie are, trying to get or extract information from a mole or somebody like who's a spy in the First Order. And they find out, through this mole that, Emperor Palpatine has survived and he's back. And you get this whole scene with Rey training on the planet, kind of showing what she's going through. It's very similar training to what Luke was doing on Dagobah with Yoda. And then Poe basically dictates to everyone that Palpatine has survived. And he doesn't know how. And I don't know. I mean, the thing about that scene is I felt like there would have been a lot more levity there if Luke was still alive to absorb that information. I feel like not having, obviously Leia, or Carrie Fisher got, rest in peace, has passed away. So, she, even though she's actually technically in the scene because they cut, bits of her footage into it, she's not really giving her reaction to Palpatine being there. That's not what she was filming when they cut those scenes. And, the only people there from the original trilogy are, Leia and Chewie doesn't speak English. So you're not really getting his reaction either. But, just getting the reaction of Rey, Poe, and Finn is not, they weren't there for like the original conflict. So seeing Luke, who was actually physically in the room when Palpatine was thrown down that shaft, and getting his reaction to Palpatine having survived that conflict at the Death Star would be heavy, right? Like, you'd be like, how is this possible? I saw him die, I mean, that would have been cool to see. Unfortunately, because Luke is no longer alive in the story, we weren't, able to do that. I think that was a missed opportunity, because that scene, should have been a lot cooler, finding out that Palpatine was still alive, but there was nobody in the room there. Han and Luke are gone. So the two people that really would have been, the reactions you would have been looking for, and maybe even Leia, are kind of robbed of you, because Leia's not there to act her scenes, and Luke and Han are dead. So it's really, you're just relying on the reaction of Rey, Finn, and Poe. And again, they never have seen Palpatine. They were kids when Palpatine was running things. So it kind of loses some of that intensity, I think. And they decide to head out and go after Palpatine. They, basically go on a fetch quest to get this dagger that's going to lead them to the Sith Wayfinder, and then the Sith Wayfinder will lead them to Exegol, so they can confront Palpatine. So what ends up happening is they go to this planet called Pasaana, and Kylo Force Skypes with Rey, steals the necklace that she got from one of the common people there, and basically they examine it, find out that she's on Pasaana, and Kylo and the Knights of Ren go out there. Knights of Ren, by the way, totally a missed opportunity in this movie, I think. I mean, they were, kind of built up to be really cool. We didn't get any of them in The Last Jedi, basically not even mentioned in that movie. And then in this movie, they come back with a Force, but they're supposed to be Force sensitive and strong and good fighters, and I really never got that sense from them, other than, looking menacing in their costumes. That's really all they pull off in this movie, unfortunately. But so they go looking for them on Pasaana, and this is where, they run into Lando. Lando does a great job, by the way. Billy D. Williams did a fantastic job. I thought he was going to be not really that coherent for this movie, but he was totally spot on. Did a great job, and seeing him in there was a nice flashback, and it was well done. And then it explains that him and Luke were trying to look for the Wayfinder also, way back when, and they kind of tracked them to this ancient bounty hunter that was out in the desert, and they go to his old ship wreckage, or his old ship, which is just sitting there in the desert, and they find in the dirt the corpse of this guy and his blade in the dirt. So they grab the blade, and they're in this cave, and then they eventually come across this snake type thing that's under the ground, and it's injured, and it looks very menacing, like it's going to attack them. And then Rey, this is where they show you that Rey has the Force heal ability, and that's actually been canonized in the show The Mandalorian as well. For those of you that haven't seen that, I'm not going to explain anything about that, but it's a very cool show. And in The Mandalorian, they're showing you that Force heal is a thing, and then Rey uses it in the film, and the snake creature is happy with them after that, and goes along on its merry way. And then they're out in the desert now, trying to get back to their ship, and Kylo now knows where Rey is, so he's flying there with his TIE silencer, and then the Knights of Ren actually end up capturing Chewie, who's actually holding the dagger. So basically, you get this scene where Rey's in the desert. It's in the trailer, where she jumps in the air as Kylo flies by in his TIE fighter, and then she chops the wing, and the ship does a tumble salt, and Kylo crashes, and then she ends up getting told by Finn that Chewie's been kidnapped, and tries to stop the transport from flying away, a la Starkiller from the Force Unleashed video games. The difference is, Starkiller was literally pulling down a Star Destroyer from the sky, which would be a lot bigger of a feat, but she's basically holding this ship in midair, which is still very, very cool, and a very strong Force ability she has to have very strong, Force ability to do this. So she's holding this ship in the air, and then Kylo comes out from the wreckage, and they're both kind of pulling at the ship, tugging it from one side to the other. And then Rey, in frustration, accidentally shoots a bolt of lightning, like lightning, Force lightning, out of her hands, like Palpatine, and blows the shit up. And the ship blows the ship up, and basically Palpatine esque. You know, she just blows the whole ship up, and you know that's how we find out that Chewie's dead. You know, and it's a very crazy scene. For a second, I didn't know. I'd read some of the rumors about the movie, but I didn't know that Chewie was gonna die. I didn't hear that, so I was totally shocked by that. I thought he was dead, and it was a crazy way to kill a character. I thought, especially Chewie. I was like, there's no way this is how he goes down. But it's hardcore. So and they did a good job with it. Then they get away, and they've lost the dagger now. So they try to find a way to get to the Sith Wayfinder, and you find out that C-3PO was able to basically translate this in his head, but he can't read it out loud to them for some reason because his programming won't allow him to translate Sith language. So they go to this planet called I forget. I forget the name of the planet. It is... Hold on. It is Kijimi. So they go to Kijimi, and that's where they meet the Kerry Russell character, Zori Bliss, and they also meet Babu Freak, this little cute dude that is able to, kind of tweak with C-3PO's memory. So the only caveat to this is that C-3PO's memory will be wiped, but, basically R2-D2 can just... re-upload C-3PO's memory, so not a big deal. Nonetheless, they get the information out of C-3PO. Babu Freak is awesome. Hilarious little creature. And then they are about to bounce, but they get the feeling from Rey that Chewie's still alive, and he's on this Star Destroyer. So they go to save Chewie, and Zori Bliss is trying to get off the planet, and she was able to attain a First Order officer's coin, which will give her access to any ship, but she gives it to Poe so they can get onto the Star Destroyer. And now Kylo's on this planet looking for Rey, and Rey is actually on his Star Destroyer trying to free Chewie. And so Poe, Finn, and all them go to free Chewie, and then she goes to Kylo's quarters to get the dagger. And while she's there, they do another Force Skype session, and then they actually have a lightsaber fight from one planet to another planet using the Force, like just Force Skype fight, which it's never happened before. But I thought it was actually kind of cool. I thought it was cool. I mean, they have this kind of unique bond. They're a dyad in the Force, which I've never heard of either. That's something that they kind of created for this. But they're basically two halves of one whole, essentially. And so they're able to have this connection with each other. And they can actually physically pull objects from their side of the world, but they can't see where each other are. And then during the fight, they accidentally knock over Vader's mask off its pedestal in Kylo's quarters, and that falls onto the planet of Kijimi on the floor there. So Kylo now knows that she's in his room. So he tells his guys to shut down the ship and that he's going there to talk to her. And you find out, like, as the crew, Poe, Finn, and Chewie are trying to escape, they get captured and they get sent to a room to be executed. And then Hux actually shoots the stormtroopers before they can gun them down, and reveals that he was the mole the whole time because he wants to take down Kylo Ren, but he doesn't care about the Resistance. So basically they get away. He brings them to the Millennium Falcon. They shoot him in the leg so that he can at least go back and say that he was attacked, and that's how they got away from him. And then they basically 1 second later just shoot Hux right in the chest, and figure out right away that he's the mole. So that's the end of Hux. They definitely dogged that character. So now Rey is alone in this hangar bay waiting for Kylo Ren, and Kylo comes in with his TIE fighter and approaches Rey, and this is where he tells her that she is in fact Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter and that she's a Palpatine. And this is like very like fan theory-esque type stuff. I mean, this is something that people were guessing that could be a possibility a few years ago when The Force Awakens first came out. And I got to tell you, like, with all the wonder that was kind of taken away from The Last Jedi, I do really like this decision. I think that she has been extremely strong in the Force, not just a Force wielder. She's been able to rival, Kylo in Force ability, which, she would have to be a very strong lineage in order to do that, or she'd have to be very strong with the Force to do that. So giving an explanation that is satisfactory is saying, basically that she's a Palpatine. So that's why she's able to rival that of, the Skywalker blood and fight against Kylo and, even stand a chance because, Skywalkers are just stronger in the Force as far as Star Wars is concerned. This is about the Skywalkers' story. So basically they then get to the section of the ship where Rey is in the hangar bay, and they use the thrusters from the Millennium Falcon to kind of blow away all the Force. The thrusters from the Millennium Falcon to blow away all the stormtroopers that are on the bay, and only Rey and Kylo are able to withstand the wind. And then basically, Rey uses a Force jump onto the Millennium Falcon, and then they peace out of there and go to this planet called Kefir, which is where they find the broken pieces of the Death Star. Okay, so this is a planet in the Endor system. So it's not the Forest Moon, it's a separate planet, but it's in the Endor system, and it's got wreckage from the Death Star on it. This is where you see in the trailer there's wreckage from the Death Star in the ocean, and they use the blade basically to see where on the Death Star that the Sith Wayfinder is, which I feel like was an unnecessary fetch quest. I mean, we didn't really need the dagger that's maybe 20, 30 years old. I mean, they made it seem like the dagger was this ancient dagger. And although it does have some significance because it was used to kill Rey's parents, in fact, I just feel like the blade was an unnecessary tool to get to this wreckage from the Death Star. They could have done something else, not like a 30, 40-year-old blade that they used to, perfectly align with wreckage from a Death Star that's, been here for 20, 30 years. I don't know. I felt like that was unnecessary. I mean, they could have just hinted in other ways that it was at the wreckage of the Death Star, and that's nostalgic enough. I mean, going to the old wreckage of the Death Star and seeing the Emperor's throne room there, that was awesome. You know what I mean? So they did a really good job with the music, and Rey just goes across the water and basically finds this room in the throne room of the Death Star, and she goes in there and sees the Sith Wayfinder, and then gets confronted by a dark version of herself, a la Luke on Dagobah in the cave, fighting Darth Vader and revealing that it's himself. So basically a double-bladed lightsaber Rey using Sith blades, and they throw down for 2 or 3 seconds, and then basically she gets stumbles back into the Emperor's throne room and drops the Wayfinder on the ground for it to tumble right into Kylo Ren's hands, who happens to be standing in the room as well. He picks it up and tells her that the only way she's getting to Exegol is with him, and he smashes it in his hands. And then they have a fight, and this is the big battle of the movie, and it was actually really well done. I mean, it's not anything like the prequels where you're getting a scene like out of the episode 1 with Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan versus Darth Maul, and it's not meant to be that way. The Jedi and the Sith at that time were a lot more heavy into fighting and training with lightsabers, so you would expect that the blade work would be a lot more intense during that time in history. Now, since Kylo and Rey aren't having lightsaber fights and aren't doing a ton of lightsaber battle training with other people, the fighting styles are much slower, more heavy-paced moves, more like Luke and Vader fighting in Return of the Jedi rather than prequel style fighting, and that makes sense. And it's kind of an awkward fight. I mean, for the most part, it looks like Kylo Ren is taking control of this fight. I mean, he actually, at many points, you're thinking he's going to win. He's going to kill Rey, and it looks like that, and he's about to. And then at that moment, you get some exposition from Maz Kanata back at the Resistance base explaining that Leia has, now to reach out to her son and use the rest of the Force energy that she has to do that. And honestly, I felt that all the scenes with Leia in the movie were great. I mean, even though it's obvious if you look at it that they obviously cut the scenes so that her the words that she's saying would work with what they're doing, and they were kind of limited with her footage. So I think that they did a great job. And anybody who's watching this movie 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that isn't really putting those two pieces together isn't going to be able to tell. It doesn't look, egregious or horrible or anything like that. They did a good job with that. And the way they, kind of used some trickery with, stand-ins to get, back ahead shots and, had her interact with everybody, there when she's not really there, and they shot this footage years ago. Hats off to them for that. I think they did a great job with it, and not using like a CGI version of her or anything like that to finish up her story. I think that the way they went with it was the right way to go, especially since they kind of canonized that you can use the Force and kill yourself with Luke last movie. So, I mean, this was a good way for her to go. So she reaches out to Ben, and during that moment, Ben stops right as he's about to kill Rey and drops his lightsaber. She catches it, stabs him in the chest, and then they both get the feeling that Leia has passed. So you get this really sentimental moment where, Rey looks at Kylo. He's dying from his wounds, or at least very injured, and they both, a tear drops down her eye, and they both look at each other, and they both know that, Kylo knows that his mom has passed, and Rey knows that Leia's passed, and she's like, it's sad. It's sad for sure. And you can see Leia, her hand drops on the bed, and definitely brought a tear to my eye. It's a weird scene too, because it looks like she's about to die, and then they have this, kind of whole shift in what's happening there. Anyway, she uses her Force heal ability to heal up Kylo, and then she tells him that she did want to grab his hand back on the Supremacy when they first, had that interaction with Supreme Leader Snoke in The Last Jedi, but she wanted to grab Ben Solo's hand, not Kylo's. And then she heals him, gets on his ship, steals his ship, and gets off the planet. And then that's when you get the scene with him and Han Solo, and I thought it was really well done. Him and Han Solo, obviously this was meant to be Leia, but Leia obviously couldn't shoot those scenes, so they got Harrison Ford to come back and reprise his role, and I think they did a good job. He's basically wants to tell his dad that he's sorry and he loves him, and Han's like, I know, and it's not meant to, I said before this that if they brought back Han as a Force ghost, that I would freak out. And thank God they didn't. No, he's just like a memory of Kylo. They didn't just totally, fudge with the Force ghosts canon and basically bring back Han Solo, who's never trained as a Jedi. He's just a memory to Kylo, but they did a good job with it, and you can see Kylo has this inner turmoil, and then he chucks his lightsaber into the water and kind of renounces himself as Kylo Ren, and kind of redeems himself and comes back to being Ben Solo again, figuratively. So it's a cool scene. And you can kind of see the struggle with him internally throughout the 3 films. I think this is the best of Adam Driver in this movie for sure, out of all 3 films. And he was by far more awesome in this movie. I mean, they really make Kylo Ren the star of this movie for sure. And then they go back to the Resistance base, and that's where they get the news drop that Leia's passed, and the reaction from Chewie is gut-wrenching. Seeing him drop to his knees and start crying, I cried seeing that. It's like, he's been friends with Leia for so long, and it's like, it was sad to see. Even though we knew that this had to happen in the movie, right? It's still sad. So, basically, Rey goes back to Ahch-To, and she goes to basically get herself into exile, like Luke did. She said she's going to do the same thing, and that, she's afraid that she's going to become, dark side Rey. That's kind of her fear, that she's going to be consumed by the dark side. So she goes to this planet and decides to, crash the ship, and she throws her lightsaber into the wreckage. And at that moment, that's when you get Luke's hand, Force Ghost Luke, catching the lightsaber, and says that that's no way to treat, the weapon of a Jedi. Basically just trashing, what he did in The Last Jedi, where he throws the lightsaber over his shoulder. And they retcon a lot of things like that in this movie. There's a scene later where, they're talking about the Haldo maneuver, where she flies with light speed into the Supremacy and destroys the the capital ship, and then they're like, oh, that's a 1 in a million shot. You know, they basically make it so that, like, you know, you can't just do that all the time, you know, and that was just a lucky, you know, because she was great or something, you know, she got lucky, you know. And they even do like light speed skipping, where they're just like hopping between, they're just light speed jumping and then stopping, light speed jumping and then stopping, and they're just hopping through things. So they make it clear that you can't just, you know, light speed into a capital ship and destroy it every time. That's what they, you know, basically retcon. And they retcon the, you know, the Rey lineage thing. They kind of retcon Luke's character as a whole. Like, he basically says when Rey's talking to him there on the planet that, you know, he was wrong, you know, and that if she doesn't go confront Palpatine, it'll be the end of the Jedi, and that all the Jedi live within her now, and, you know, that Leia would have wanted her to continue, and that he takes her to, you know, where he's holding Leia's lightsaber on the island and says that she would have wanted her to have it. And Leia actually has a lightsaber, and there's a flashback scene where Luke explains that he trained Leia, and actually, you know, on her last day of training, so she completed her training, she decided to stop training as a Jedi because she had a vision of the death of her son. So that really is cool, because it kind of makes the whole training with Leia on this planet, you know, a little bit more significant. It's not like she just wasn't trained by Luke and she did the best that she could. She was fully trained as a Jedi by Luke, and was able to train Rey later on. So, you know, ipso facto, you know, Rey got trained, you know, in the same way that Luke did. So, I mean, it's she kind of got trained by Luke. So it's very cool that they did that, and they even show a scene where Leia is able to defeat Luke in, you know, a kind of a sparring battle with each other with lightsabers. So they show that Leia was pretty good at fighting with a lightsaber when she was younger, and you know, they did have a CGI scene with her there and Luke, making them look younger, but I thought that was fine. I mean, that was not in a distasteful way. That was to kind of show that she is pretty strong with, you know, her Jedi ability. So, you know, her training with Rey was not just some, you know, throwaway thing. She actually got some real training. So I thought that was cool. I also thought that the relationship, you know, between Rey, Poe, and Finn in this movie was better than it has been in any of the other movies. You know, you could tell that they now know each other a lot better, and there's a much better rapport between all of the characters. And this movie was good. It was funny. You know, the C-3PO was funny in this movie. I thought that there was a lot of great things. Now, basically, she also gets Luke Skywalker's X-Wing that he pulls out of the water like Yoda did in the original trilogy, and Luke catches a lightsaber and then pulls a ship out of the water. So now it's completely 100% confirmed that Force ghosts can affect the physical plane, and they can you know, do things and fight like other people can, just like anything else, which really makes them more powerful. But that's really the extent that we get with that. You know, they don't really explain too much more other than the fact that he's able to catch a lightsaber, lift things out. Yoda is able to strike lightning down on the ground. So I don't know why Force ghosts aren't actually fighting, but you know, maybe they just have you know, more of like a nexus on certain planets like Octu, where the Jedi history is really strong. I don't know. You know, maybe it's like more of a Force planet kind of thing. But nonetheless, he sends her off, and this is the Luke that, you know, I feel like we should have gotten in The Last Jedi. I mean, Luke is very optimistic, and he wants Rey to go, you know, to go confront Palpatine, and, you know, basically, you know, win the battle for the Jedi over the Sith. And this movie's very Sith versus Jedi heavy. You know, it seemed like they were kind of getting away from that in the first two films, and this one brings it right back home to, you know, the conflict between the Jedi and the Sith. And Rey takes the wayfinder from Kylo's ship. She takes Luke's X-Wing and heads to Exegol. There's an imprint from Luke's X-Wing to the Resistance base, so they can all see which way Rey's going, kind of giving them a marker to follow so that they can also get to Exegol. So they get all the coordinates, they follow Rey there, they bring the entire Resistance fleet to Exegol. Now they get to this planet, and they have a tremendous uphill climb or uphill battle to try to fight against all these Star Destroyers that can, you know, basically they all have planet-killing weapons on them, like the Death Star, and Rey confronts Palpatine. And while she's confronting Palpatine, he tells her that that he wanted her to come here and basically take his throne, and that he's always wanted her here, and that the reason that he wants her here is to strike him down so he can eventually transfer his essence into her body. And you can see that they're in this stadium, and there's all these Sith eternal followers. There's apparently this ancient Sith cult that has been there for years and years and years, like preparing for the return of the Sith. Now, I don't know, it's not really explained whether Palpatine, started this thing on Exegol, bringing back all these Sith loyalists, or if they have just been there waiting for the correct Sith leader to come and kind of guide them in the right direction and bring back the victory, or bring the galaxy back, to being under the control of the Sith. And that's kind of what I get the gist of, is that like they've been there for a very long time before Palpatine, and Palpatine seems to have just come along, knowing that there is like some force in the outer regions that is like calling to him, and then he goes there, finds Exegol, and then basically takes control of this Sith eternal order, and anyway, there's thousands of these Sith in the crowd, like just kind of helping Palpatine take this ritual to the next level, so he can either take over Rey's body, or basically inhabit Rey himself. So either she's going to take the throne herself, or he's going to take control of her body and control the Sith with in her body as a vessel, and then Kylo comes down. I guess he's taking a TIE fighter from the wreckage of the Death Star. He comes down to Exegol himself. I don't know how he got there without a wayfinder. I guess he followed her signature too. Nonetheless, he gets there, and on the way in, he has to confront the Knights of Ren. And they start kicking his butt, but then Rey force passes him like a lightsaber behind her head as she tells Palpatine that she's going to strike him down, and confirms that with him. She passes the lightsaber to Ben, and Kylo then kills the Knights of Ren in short order. These guys just get thrown around like rag dolls, basically. 6 of them just destroyed, And they're supposed to be force sensitive. I mean, in the in the visual dictionary, it says that they're force sensitive, but it's not to the same degree that like Kylo and Rey are. But I mean, I didn't see any force abilities. I didn't see anything. They don't have lightsabers, nothing. You know what I mean? So they're just cannon fodder, basically. But they look cool. So Rey and Ben confront Palpatine, and then this is when he realizes that they're a dyad in the Force or whatever. Like they're like they have some sort of bond, and he drains them of their like essence or life, and then kind of rejuvenates himself to the point where he basically looks just like Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, like a much younger Palpatine, and much more powerful. And then he lifts Skywalker up in the air and says, "Just as I dropped or I fell all those years ago, so too falls the last Skywalker." And he throws Ben down a shaft, just like he fell down a shaft. And then Rey kind of tries to focus and become one with the Force, and she like summons the power of like all the ancient Jedi before her. And this is where you hear the voice of Mace Windu, Yoda, Qui-Gon Jinn. You get the original Alec Guinness, Ben Kenobi, and then you get Ewan McGregor Kenobi. You get Ahsoka Tano's voice in there. You get Kanan. You get Ayla Secure, I believe, and then you even get Anakin coming back, and you get Luke. And Anakin tells her, bring balance to the Force as I once did, and that's pretty cool. And then she stands up and basically gets Ben's lightsaber and uses both lightsabers to deflect the Force lightning back at Palpatine. And then Palpatine, basically disintegrates. I don't know why Palpatine can't stop shooting Force lightning or just lift Rey up and throw her down her shaft like he did to Ben a few minutes ago. But apparently she's a lot stronger now because she has the power of all the Jedi behind her. And Palpatine basically explodes, and by doing so destroys all the rest of the temple around him and kills all those Sith Eternalists out there in the crowd. And he ends up actually shooting, before he dies, he shoots a whole beam of Force lightning into the sky, like stunning all of the ships from the Resistance. and it's very that's pulled directly from the expanded universe. Like he used to be able to use force storms or create force storms, which is much like that, where he just it's this power that Palpatine had in the books, and it wasn't canon anymore until the film, and now also those Sith the Sith loyalists. That's also something from the books. I mean, or something from the expanded universe. They Vitiate, was hiding in the past also to rebuild the Order of the Sith, and basically he kept the Sith in hiding for thousands of years until they finally were able to come back, and he was able to become the Emperor. And that's kind of what they're doing here just with Palpatine. So it's cool. Anyway, that battle with Palpatine exerts all the power that Rey has, and she actually drops dead on the ground. And then Ben comes to her aid, and he uses whatever life force he has left to bring her back. Now he holds her in a very specific way, like in her belly, which would make me think that maybe there's something there. I don't know. But the way he does it, he brings her back. They have a moment, they kiss, and then Ben fades away and dies, and he basically disappears like Yoda. And then Leia, you see her body disappear as well, and they all become one with the Force. So I'm assuming that Ben is going to become a Force ghost like Luke, and it's crazy. I don't know how I feel about there not being a Skywalker anymore, and that's why I'm kind of hoping that maybe like when he touched her like her stomach area there, that maybe he somehow transferred like his essence into her, and maybe she'll have a child one day. It's a Skywalker. I don't know. I mean, that would be kind of cool. But effectively, with Ben dying, there's no Skywalkers left, so that's a bummer. And I felt like the last scene would have been a lot cooler if we got Anakin, physically in the flesh there. Like, I'm again not like a revived Anakin, but Hayden Christensen, Force Ghost, helping Rey defeat Palpatine was the way that should have ended. This story is about Anakin Skywalker, Episode 1 all the way to the end. Anakin is the chosen one, and his voice was there. I've heard rumors that maybe they did shoot a scene like this, but I mean, I feel like the one thing that would have really made, I mean, there's, some things that I, didn't love, some things that I've loved very much about this movie, but the one thing that they could have done that would really make me over the top excited about this movie would have been to see, the Force ghost of Anakin there behind Rey helping her defeat Palpatine. Would have been it for me. And just the reaction of Palpatine, like seeing Anakin there, knowing after all this time that he's there to defeat him, that would have been cool to see, like the reaction of Palpatine seeing Anakin's Force Ghost. And then also the reaction of Ben, eventually when he comes out of the ground, seeing Anakin standing there and seeing his grandfather's Force Ghost. That would have been cool too. It's a missed opportunity, I think. I mean, that, again, Anakin should, especially now that they kind of canonized that Force Ghosts can do something physically, and Anakin is a Force Ghost, he should have been there to help her defeat Palpatine, and that would have really brought the whole story full circle, I think. That's the one thing. That's the one gripe I probably have. I feel like he should have been there, for sure. But overall, I loved it. I mean, she goes back to Tatooine at the end and buries Leia and Luke's lightsabers, and then she creates her own lightsaber using the pieces of her staff that she had back on Jakku. And, we'll see. Again, I don't think we're going to get a Skywalker saga movie or a movie based on Rey or anything like that anytime soon. So if something like that happens, it'll be way down the line. And, maybe Kylo passed some essence into her, and she's going to have a Skywalker kid at some point, and maybe there's a legacy to tell. Maybe she rebuilds the Order of the Jedi, and maybe they could just tell some story about Rey. And but she takes on the Skywalker name at the end, as you see Luke and Leia's ghosts in the distance, on Tatooine, and that's kind of where they go. And I thought it was good. I was very happy with the decisions that he made overall, and I think the tone of the movie was good. It's very fast-paced. I like those kinds of movies, and I think that it wraps up everything in a bow tie, I guess, to the best of their ability based on what was left after The Last Jedi. So, very satisfactory ending for me. I think that, it definitely kind of wraps up the trilogy in a better way than I thought it was going to be. I was really wondering, what we were going to get here, and I thought that, given the circumstances, I thought they did a very good job. And it was a really exciting movie to watch. It's something that, my favorite out of all three of the newer movies. I think it's better than The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi, personally. But there are a lot of different opinions about it, and some people like it, some people hate it. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Overall, I give it 2 thumbs up. Way up. I'm super happy about it, and I'm glad I was able to see it with my son. And I'm looking forward to it coming on DVD like all the rest of the Star Wars movies, so I can binge all 9 of them one day with my kid. But you guys let me know what you thought. I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please do smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and may the Force be with you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Yes, Master.